cutting across all of Central America, we have what it's called the dry corridor, which is a semi-arid region that's also used for crops. But that region has been more prone to droughts. So then on the one hand, you're losing crops because of the excessive rain and not being able to pinpoint when to cut it, when to crop, because, either there's too much rain or there's an excessively long, like dry period, or then the dry region has too much drought that, for the last years, the countries have been in a food insecurity position. And this is all due to climate change. And one of the main things people will tell you there is that they used to know when to do things. You look up at the sky and something in the trees or whatever would be able to tell them, and now they can't. So, which leaves a lot of people in hunger. And that is only just going to get worse. So, besides that, you also have the issue that they're living in vulnerable locations, like when I said in areas with the steep inclination. So there's some parts where there's just one mudslide after another that the mountain never regenerates. And all that is just going to keep on sliding and affecting the water sources. So you have the whole Cuenca watershed being lost there. And instead of the sources of water that, they could take irrigation canals and just for human consumption, it's all being muddied because of everything that the river is bringing down.
I think the last 5 years they have frequent flooding during the rainy seasons. I think it's a mix of expansion of the oil palm plantation and also the climates. This year they have 3 weeks of floodings and they didn't move from their villages. They lost their livelihood, especially women or household where main income comes from rubber tapping.
Quindi l'impatto dei cambiamenti climatici in questi contesti è devastante, proprio perché partiamo da una condizione in cui, ad esempio, già sono instaurate questo tipo di attività con i loro impatti, e il cambiamento climatico che porta a un'alterazione ovviamente dei pattern meteoclimatici. Ci sono già situazioni, ad esempio anche in Guatemala, in cui si prevede una riduzione della quantità di pioggia, e quindi in una situazione in cui la miniera sfrutta un giacimento minerario e ha bisogno di milioni e milioni di litri d'acqua al giorno, prosciuga un acquifero, questo ha un impatto immenso nel momento in cui parliamo anche dell'impatto poi successivo di un cambiamento climatico.
Because of the deforestation, in Congo we are eating caterpillar. It's a good food for us. We have some vegetables into the forest, but by cutting the forest, we are losing vegetables, we are losing mushroom, we are losing some kind of animals, fishes, that's all. And in addition, we have a problem of the water. It's going to rain today. And if it's rain, we have the problem of the water pulling every day to the house and to the road. That's the problem. I think that you understand.
After the palm oil plantation came, the majority of the villagers who used to be paddy farmers and then fishermen who have like a sustainable way of fishing and sustainable way of farming is disrupted because this plantation using a high amount of pesticides, so their paddy field become high infested with pests, so they had to use pesticides. If they're not using it, they will have a harvest failure. For those who have a continuous harvest failure, they will sell the land to the company or the plantations, and they become the laborers of the plantations. The other thing is that most of the people or the villagers or the communities is a fisherman. But because the plantation comes, the water is polluted, there is a decrease in catch. For those who are older, they couldn't become palm oil laborers because of their age. And for others who looking for honey, forest honey, they have to move further because the forest was destroyed. There's a land clearing of the forest clearing. The other thing is that they lost their medicinal plant resources, which is in the forest. They also lost a building material that they use or they harvest from the forest. So a lot of change in, I think, cultural, especially because if you know that people in Borneo, their houses above water, so they use a special woods. If you have heard about belian, or we call it Borneo ironwood, they usually use it as a foundation pole, because when the woods is submerged in the water, they become more stronger. So they use it, but now because they lack of the resource, they lack of wood, the ironwood, Borneo ironwood, or we call it belian or ulin. Now when they are building houses, they use cement. But they said that, well, we have to renew the structures, or they have to maintain the structures because of they cannot stand with the waters. So that's changed a lot.
One example is Lake Atitlan in Guatemala, that's surrounded by indigenous communities. But you also have some other smaller industry. And everybody throws their wastewater and like the textile dyes and everything down into, their closest river stream. And it all ends up in the lake, polluting it. So then the villagers that go fishing there for the restaurants or ecotourism and all that, then, you can't eat the fish and you can't go swimming because it contaminates. So even those populations that live off of tourism are also being impacted by the same activities, that ecosystems are being destroyed.
Our resources is pulled by European, by American, by Chinese people. They are very, very much here in DRC, taking our natural resources, mining, petrol, wood, and so on, mushroom, and so on. They are taking everything they can. Now, it's European. We are bringing every day the wood to the Europe by the river and by the ocean and the sea. And we are going with the wood in Europe. In addition, Chinese people are making timber in our country. And we are taking wood every day. And the wood is going over of the sea, the river, to attend China. And sometimes the wood is living here and it's going to America. This is the disaster American, European, Chinese are doing here in our country. In my own perception, idea, I think that we are pooling our riches. We are pooling it, and the communities are very, very poor, and the country is very, very rich, but the communities are very, very poor. That's why, as a leader, as me, you're shouting every day. You're writing to the government. You're writing to the company. You're shouting out to the China so that they can go away. Indigenous people have the problem of the land grabbing because we have some concession given to Chinese, to European by our governments. We have the problem of the mine, where the mine is so large, people are expropriated by their land. They don't have land because they say that the land is for the state. That's the problem. in DRC, we have good law. Every day the deputies are making the good law, but we have the problem of the application, and the law are not vulgarized to the community. The law is there in the capital, in the parliament, but the communities don't know those laws. Our action according to the law, we are taking law and making it translation in the local language, because one of our problems as women don't know how to read, to spell, to speak in French. And the law is spelled, written in French. In DRC, we have a lot of local language. I'm speaking Swahili, Sushana is speaking Lingala, and Susanna is speaking Kikongo. And we are making every day the translation of the law, and we sensibilize the community so that they can know.
Sì, le attività estrattive minerarie, petrolifere, così come le attività agroindustriali, quindi l'agricoltura intensiva, mi riferisco ad esempio alle monoculture, quindi di qualsiasi tipo, sia a scopo alimentare che a scopo anche energetico, si vanno già a instaurare di per sé in alcuni contesti vulnerabili e sensibili sia dal punto di vista ambientale che socio-economico. Si parla di governi che hanno una scarsa attenzione già di per sé all'ambiente, quindi hanno delle normative ambientali molto blande, molto permissive in termini di contaminazione. Sono governi in cui magari c'è anche poca attenzione ovviamente al rispetto dei diritti umani delle persone. In questi contesti, nel momento in cui si vanno a instaurare questi settori industriali, l'impatto è doppio.
When the Spaniards came, they took land away. So then, the whole thing of where the land rights documents is iffy, because some say it's theirs, but what if you took it away by force? And then in Guatemala, I'm summarizing the story. There was this president democratically elected that wanted to restore lands that were stolen from the people. And because there was this strong communist wave coming from Russia and Cuba and perhaps Nicaragua, then the US and the CIA intervened and ousted him. In the middle of all this, there was a United Fruit Company that started selling bananas and pineapples and all that in these lands. And they were going to be affected when the president was, in the process of restoring the land to the indigenous people. So anyways, they did a coup on this president, and then the military got involved. And that's when started the 30-year civil war, at least in Guatemala. And in that war, there was genocide because they targeted mainly indigenous populations. So you mainly from the army or from the guerrilla. And the most affected were, again, indigenous populations.
A volte però succede che all'interno della comunità alcuni membri magari cedono alla tentazione ovviamente magari di vendere quindi le proprie terre, quindi di permettere a un colonizzatore di entrare in questi territori e quindi di depredare queste risorse naturali. E nel momento in cui succede questo ovviamente c'è una sorta di cattura comunitaria, di rottura della comunità, spesso ovviamente anche irreversibile, e questo porta ovviamente a depotenziare la loro forza di resistenza contro le varie forme di distruzione che agiscono poi su queste popolazioni. E succede anche spesso che in queste lotte sono spesso disorientati perché perdono la terra, perdono la loro identità, perdono le varie forme di sussistenza e quindi finiscono spesso vittime anche di depressione, alcolismo e abuso di droga.
This exploitation is a new colonialism for us, I suggest, because if you're in the forest, you're taking both of things, something for indigenous and local communities knowledge. You're taking wood, you're taking the mine, the petrol, and so the women. And abusively, you're taking women. And they have a child with women, and if he wanted to go back to Europe, to go back to America, they leave killed. to do the colonization, you have to know these people. They are firstly learning our language. Secondly, they are learning our cultures. Firstly, they are pulling our riches, and they do the new colonization in our country. We are as the slaves. We are slaves of our riches. We are very rich, but the communities is very poor.
I think the important thing is that climate change hit the lower income household, the marginalized one, women and children. I think climate change will impact our human rights. We don't have enough access to clean waters, other things that really will hit our basic needs in life.
We have a river, we have the Congo big river, but in Kinshasa town, we haven't got access to the water. It's a big problem, and it's created the violence between women and between women and men, because people don't have access to the water now.
Women have to bear more social burdens. For example, there is a household, the husband and wife working in a palm oil plantations as a labor. The woman will have to wake up at 2 p.m. just to prepare everything for their husband and their children. And then after they came to from works, they still have to do like the household chores, and they will stay up late at 10 or 11 while the husbands already sleep at 9. So the social burden is really big for women.
Women haven't got access to land. That's the problem, and we are working so hard so that the Congolese government can give a law in order to give access to women to land. Congolese state can hear the position of the women and making the place of the women in the decision making. We are working with indigenous people because we have the problem of, we have some specific law according to women. And the law, we are making a translation of this different law in the local languages so that we can, the women in the villages everywhere can have some information according to the law, and to put it out. How can we do what the law says so that they can have the women's rights? And the indigenous people are considered as the slaves of the other people here in the earth. That's why we are combining marginalization, discrimination, the violence against indigenous people, against women, because women don't have a voice in the earth.
Nel momento in cui queste attività estrattive che contaminano e che riducono la biodiversità, riducono l'accesso alle varie risorse naturali, quindi acqua, suolo, fondamentalmente la popolazione si trova in una situazione di difficoltà perché non avendo ad esempio accesso all'acqua è molto più vulnerabile in termini di impatto sanitario. Non avendo accesso all'acqua deve fare chilometri a piedi per raggiungere magari una sorgente più pulita, perché la miniera di turno gli ha contaminato la sorgente ad esempio della propria comunità, e questo implica ovviamente un dispendio di energie, un minore accesso all'acqua. L'acqua è la base dell'igiene, della cura della famiglia, soprattutto a capo delle famiglie ci sono spesso le donne in queste comunità, quindi la donna è colei che provvede alla raccolta dell'acqua, all'agricoltura, quindi se si trova ad avere un'acqua inquinata non riesce ovviamente a soddisfare i bisogni della famiglia.
I mean, the tasks are done by gender. So, you know, the men and the boys work out in the fields, earn the money, the women stay at home and cook and clean house and have children or take care of children. Well, both. There is a very strong separation there. When different donors or just even, you know, in the discourse of how to have more diversity and gender, you know, have more women involved, it's hard because a lot of it is cultural and not just talking to women and explaining why it's important for women to be part of a project. In this case, energy projects is important for women because women are the main users of energy in the home, whether it be for lighting or for cooking. But you also need to explain that to the men, why it's important for them to accept that the women work and be involved. And in some cases, they have seen the value, but it's a process. It's not something that you say, well, this is like a requirement, or we want this, or we suggest this to happen. I think it also has to be involved with the whole explanation of why. Not to offend anybody in the Western world, but I think that, like, even if you look at the States, you know, you could call the States Western, but in terms of gender diversity, I think there's still a long way to go, and even more so with race.